Hi, I'm Elisa Monroe, and before I tell you what happened to me, I want to thank you for being here because this story isn't just mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who's ever been betrayed and found the courage to stand again. There was one quiet, ordinary night when my life split in two. Before trust, and after it shattered. It was 3:12 a.m. when my phone buzzed. I thought it was nothing until I saw the message. Large withdrawal from business account. Amount, $50,000. My hands froze. My heart stopped. And then I saw the name on the transfer, my father-in-law. In that single moment, everything I believed about family, loyalty, and love turned to ash. But this isn't a story about loss. It's a story about how a woman learns to rebuild herself not from power, but from pain. How someone who was broken learns to rise, not for revenge, but for truth. So before we begin, I want you to know something. If you've ever been lied to by someone you trusted, if you've ever been told to stay quiet for the sake of family, then this story is for you. Grab your coffee. Take a deep breath. Because you and I were going to walk through this together. And when it's over, I promise, you won't see betrayal the same way again. Welcome to Revenge HouseUSA. Stay with me, the story starts right after this. It was 3:12 a.m. when the notification buzzed on my phone. Large withdrawal from business account ending in 4,721. Amount, $50,000. At first, I thought I was dreaming. But the second buzz made my heart pound so hard it hurt. I sat up in bed. The dark room glowing blue from my phone screen. $50,000. Gone. My company, Monroe Cyber Systems, wasn't a huge corporation. Every dollar mattered. I ran it from my home office in Austin, building it from scratch after years of freelancing in IT security. I knew exactly where every cent went, and I never authorized a transfer that large. I grabbed my laptop from the nightstand, the glow of the screen cutting through the dark. I logged into my business account. The number was real. $50,000 had vanished into an account named Henderson Building Group. My chest tightened. That name? Henderson. My father-in-law's last name. Walter Henderson had been helping me with bookkeeping for the past 6 months after my accountant moved to Denver. A retired CPA, a man everyone in the family called trustworthy to the core. He had all my financial logins because he insisted it would make things easier for me. Now my hands were shaking. I opened my system logs, something I built myself. Every keystroke, every IP, every login attempt. And there it was. At 2:57 a.m., my home office computer was accessed using my own credentials. IP traced to the Henderson residence, north of Austin. I clicked the security footage from my indoor camera. The timestamp flickered. 2:59 a.m. The door opened. Walter stepped inside, wearing his old gray hoodie, carrying his laptop bag. He typed on my keyboard for exactly 7 minutes. Then he left, locking the door behind him like nothing had happened. My stomach turned. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't an outsider. This wasn't some hacker from across the world. This was family. The man who toasted me at my wedding. The one who once called me the daughter he never had. I stared at the paused frame on my screen, his face illuminated by the same monitor I was looking at now. And in that silence, something in me snapped. All the warmth, all the trust, all the family loyalty I'd clung to suddenly felt like a cruel joke. I didn't cry. Not that night. I just sat there, stone still, cold. Awake, while the first light crept through my window blinds. By sunrise, one thought burned inside me like fire. He thinks he stole my money, but he has no idea who he just stole from. By morning, I wasn't the same person who went to bed the night before. Something in me had changed like a switch flipped from hurt to cold. I showered, dressed in my navy blazer, and drove straight downtown to Lone Star Bank. My reflection in the elevator glass didn't look like a woman who had been betrayed. It looked like a woman preparing for war. When I reached the branch manager's office, I laid out the evidence like cards in a poker game, screenshots, system logs, timestamps, and video stills. Her face went pale halfway through. Mrs. Monroe, this looks like internal embezzlement. We'll flag it immediately and freeze the receiving account. I nodded calmly. Please do. And I'll be filing a report with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I already know the suspect. Her pen froze midair. You do? Yes, I said quietly. My father-in-law. The words tasted like acid, but I didn't flinch. That afternoon, I called my contact at the FBI agent Caroline Vega. We'd met 2 years earlier when I worked as a cybersecurity consultant on a government contract. She trusted my expertise. I trusted her precision. Eliza, she said after listening to my story. This is serious. You're talking about felony, embezzlement, and computer fraud. Are you sure you have digital proof? I have everything, I replied. Every click, every keystroke, every second of footage. When she asked me to send the files, I uploaded them within minutes. As the progress bar filled, I realized my hands weren't shaking anymore. I was steady, dead steady. That night, I sat in my office, surrounded by monitors streaming my company's security feeds. I stared at the frozen image of Walter sneaking into my office at 3 a.m. His face looked almost peaceful. I whispered to the empty room. You thought you were stealing from a family member. You were actually breaking into a cybersecurity firm. The irony was poetic. I had built my career catching digital thieves. I had written protocols to protect clients from exactly this kind of insider theft. And now, the thief had chosen me as his victim. The system I'd designed to protect others would now be used to destroy the man who'd once claimed to protect me. By midnight, Agent Vega called again. We're opening a formal case. Don't confront him yet, Eliza. Let's build this clean. When we move hard. I stared at the glowing monitors, every blinking dot a reminder of his betrayal. I used to think justice came from anger. But in that moment, I realized justice comes from patience and evidence. As the Texas night swallowed the last sound in my house, I made myself a promise. If Walter Henderson wanted to play a financial game with me, I'd show him what a professional does when family turns into fraud. By Friday night, everything looked normal from the outside. The smell of roasted garlic chicken filled the kitchen, soft jazz played in the background, and my husband, Ethan, poured wine while his father chatted about construction contracts as if the world were perfectly fine. But I knew the truth. Every word that came out of Walter Henderson's mouth felt like a lie covered in charm. He sat across from me at the table, neat, confident, silver hair perfectly combed, completely unaware that the FBI was already watching his accounts. He raised his glass. To family, the only people who really matter. I forced a smile and lifted my glass. The stem almost cracked under my grip. To family, I echoed, tasting bitterness instead of wine. Ethan laughed at one of his father's jokes, not noticing the tremor in my hand. Linda, my mother-in-law, chatted about their upcoming anniversary trip to Santa Fe. Everyone looked so happy. And all I could think about was how Walter had walked into my office like a thief in the night, then sat at this very table pretending to be the family patriarch. My pulse drummed in my ears. Business seems to be going well, Walter said suddenly, cutting his steak with surgical precision. You're doing great for yourself, Eliza. You must be swimming in profits by now. I met his eyes across the table. I keep close track of my cash flow. He smiled, slow and knowing. You've always been good with numbers. But you know, sometimes family has to help each other out. If one of us is struggling, those with more should step in. That's what family is for. My heart clenched. The audacity of it, him preaching about family generosity while sitting on stolen money, made me want to scream. Ethan nodded absent-mindedly, agreeing with his father, not realizing the landmine he was sitting next to. I took a long sip of wine, steadying my breath. You're right, I said softly. Family should help family. But that depends on whether everyone's honest about their struggles. Walter looked at me for a beat too long, then chuckled. You've always been sharp, Eliza. Maybe too sharp. That laugh, so casual, so smug, was gasoline on my rage. I wanted to slam my laptop on the table, show him the footage, watch the color drain from his face, but I didn't. Not yet. Justice requires timing, not explosions. So I smiled, perfectly polite, Perfectly fake. Don't worry, I said, cutting my chicken with the same calm precision. I take notes on everything. Walter raised a brow, amused, completely missing the double meaning. After dinner, he lingered in my home office, as he always did. I stood in the doorway, watching him glance at the computer he'd used to steal from me. He patted my shoulder. You're lucky, Eliza. Some people never realize how easy they have it. I forced one last smile. Oh, I realize it, Walter. In fact, I document everything. He laughed, thinking I was joking. But as he walked out the door, my camera's red light blinked, recording every step. He thought he'd fooled me with charm and family dinners. But I'd already set the table for his downfall. The next morning, the sun rose over Austin like nothing had happened. But I knew this was the day everything would break. At 8:42 a.m., my phone rang. Walter's name flashed across the screen. My stomach tightened, but I forced my voice steady. Good morning, Dad, I said, using the same polite tone I'd always used. Eliza, I wanted to follow up on what we talked about last night, he began, his voice confident. About that possible investment, my company's in a tough spot. I could really use $50,000 to get through the quarter. I almost laughed at how predictable he was. He wanted to turn his theft into a loan, to rewrite the story before I could expose it. But I needed him to believe he still had control. I've been thinking about it, I said. You've done so much for us. Let me check the numbers and get back to you. He exhaled with relief. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I knew you'd understand. Family helps family. When he hung up, I looked straight at the surveillance monitor in my office where Agent Caroline Vega's face appeared on a secure call. You heard that? I asked. Every word, she said. That's our cover story now. We've got the warrant. We move within the hour. By 10 a.m., I sat in silence, the hum of my computer filling the room. Outside, traffic rolled lazily through downtown. Inside, my pulse raced with a calm fury I couldn't explain. Caroline called again at 10:37. We're en route to his business. Stay put, Eliza. He doesn't know yet. I watched the clock tick to 10:58. Then my phone lit up again, Walter. I answered. So, he said lightly. Any updates about that investment? I really need to know today. I kept my tone casual. You'll get an answer soon, Walter. Just as I finished the sentence, a faint sound came through her earpiece, the crackle of radio chatter. Unit 3 approaching. Suspect entering office. I didn't need to ask what was happening. I could almost see it. The FBI SUVs pulling into the parking lot, the agents stepping out with badges drawn, the confusion turning into horror on his face. 2 minutes later, Caroline's voice came through. It's done, he's in custody. We found records of multiple unauthorized transfers, not just yours. He's been running a pattern for years. For a moment, I couldn't move. Relief washed over me, cold, heavy, final. The man who thought he was too clever to be caught had just been arrested for federal embezzlement, wire fraud, and computer crimes. I walked to the window, sunlight spilling across my desk. The city looked the same, but everything inside me had shifted. Walter Henderson wasn't my father-in-law anymore. He was Exhibit A. I whispered to myself, half shaking, half smiling. He thought I was just the girl who married his son. He forgot I build systems that catch people like him. For the first time in days, I took a deep breath. Justice had begun. By the time I got home that evening, my phone was buzzing nonstop. News spreads fast in Austin, especially when the FBI is involved. When I stepped into the house, Ethan was sitting at the kitchen table. His face pale. A half-empty glass of bourbon in front of him. His mother, Linda, was beside him. Eyes red from crying. Eliza, she said, voice trembling. What did you do? I froze. What I did. They arrested Walter this morning, she cried. Federal agents came to his office. They said you filed the complaint. Please tell me that's not true. My throat tightened. Linda, he stole $50,000 from my company. I had no choice. She slammed her hand against the table. He's your father-in-law. You don't destroy family over money. I stared at her, stunned. He destroyed this family the moment he broke into my office and took what wasn't his. Ethan stood up slowly. Is it true? He asked quietly. You went to the FBI without telling me? His tone cut deeper than any accusation. I swallowed hard. I had evidence, Ethan. I needed to protect the company. You know what it means when federal money gets stolen. It's not just theft, it's wire fraud. I had to act. He shook his head, disbelief clouding his eyes. He made a mistake, Eliza. He would have paid it back. Would he? I snapped. He forged transfers, erased records, and logged into my system at 3 a.m. That's not a mistake, Ethan. That's premeditated theft. Linda began sobbing. You're tearing this family apart. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Every word they threw at me landed like a stone. They weren't seeing me as a wife or daughter-in-law anymore. Just as the woman who sent their patriarch to prison. I took a step back, trembling. You think I wanted this? You think I enjoyed finding out that the man who held my wedding bouquet stole from me? Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. I don't even know who to believe anymore. That sentence hit harder than anything Walter had done. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone. I walked out of the kitchen, down the hall to my office, the same office Walter had violated. I sat there in the dark, surrounded by silent screens and blinking LEDs. In my world, data never lies. But people do. The house was quiet except for Linda's muffled crying. I whispered to myself, barely holding back tears. They think I chose justice over family. What they don't see is that family stopped choosing me the moment they defended a thief. I closed my eyes and made a vow. If this was the price of standing for truth, I'd pay it again, even if it meant losing everyone. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and old paper, the kind of place where truth had no emotion, only evidence. I sat behind the prosecutor's table, my palms pressed together, forcing myself to breathe evenly. My heart wasn't beating in fear anymore. It was beating in rhythm with justice. Across the room, Walter Henderson sat in a navy suit, his wrists free but his pride shackled. He looked older, smaller. Like a man finally realizing the empire of lies he'd built was crumbling. Ethan sat behind him, silent. He didn't look at me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. When the judge entered, the room stood still. United States versus Walter Henderson, the clerk announced. My name followed in the charges as the primary victim. I'd been in countless boardrooms, but nothing compared to the tension of that courtroom. Every eye felt like a spotlight. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Emily Grant, began methodically. Your Honor, the defendant used legitimate access to Mrs. Monroe's business accounts to transfer $50,000 into his own company. This was not an accident. This was embezzlement. Walter's lawyer stood. Your Honor, Mr. Henderson believed he had permission. It was an advance, a family misunderstanding. Not a federal crime. I felt anger stir in my chest, but I stayed composed. Emily turned toward me. Mrs. Monroe, please take the stand. No. I walked up, swore the oath, and faced the courtroom. Tell us, in your own words, Emily said, how you discovered the transfer. I described everything, the alert, the IP address, the keystroke logs, the security footage. My voice didn't tremble once. Every detail landed like a hammer. Then Emily played the audio clip from my home camera, Walter's voice during that dinner, smug and unguarded. Eliza makes too much money anyway. She won't even notice $50,000 missing. The room went silent. I turned my head slowly toward him. His face turned pale, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. That, Emily said, her voice steady, is not a misunderstanding. That's intent. Walter tried to speak, but the judge raised a hand. Mr. Henderson, enough. Theft is theft, regardless of family ties. When the verdict came down guilty on all counts, I didn't cheer, didn't smile. I just felt an enormous, aching release. Like someone had finally cut the chain around my chest. As the bailiff approached him, Walter looked at me. You could have handled this privately, he whispered. I met his gaze and answered quietly. I did handle it privately, until you broke into my office. They led him away. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the empty defense chair. The courtroom noise faded. My vision blurred with quiet tears I refused to hide anymore. He was guilty. And I was free. 3 years later, The envelope arrived without a return address, just a faded federal stamp and my name scrawled in a familiar, shaky hand. I knew before opening it. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper, the ink smudged like it had been written through tears. Dear Eliza, I've had a lot of time to think here. I understand now that I wasn't just stealing money. I was stealing trust, yours, Ethan's, everyone's. I read the words slowly, my throat tightening. You built something from nothing, and instead of being proud, I envied you. I told myself it was harmless, that family money should stay in the family. But I see now that I used that excuse to justify greed. He went on about the sleepless nights in his cell, about the silence that felt like judgment, about missing birthdays and holidays that now existed only through prison glass. You didn't betray family, Eliza. You protected what was right. I would have done the same if I'd had your courage. My hands trembled as I folded the paper. The irony stung. The man who once accused me of destroying the family was now calling me courageous. I sat by the window of my office, the same office he'd crept into that night. The glow of the afternoon sun spilled across my desk, lighting up the same security camera that had recorded his crime. But this time, I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. Walter was serving his final months of a 4-year sentence. I could have written back. I could have told him I forgave him, that I hoped he found some kind of redemption. But forgiveness, I'd learned, isn't always something you announce. Sometimes it's something you quietly decide for yourself. I placed the letter in a drawer with the old evidence files not as proof of guilt, but as proof of closure. For years, I'd carried the weight of being the villain in my own family's story. But reading those lines, I realized something profound. I didn't destroy the family. I exposed what was already broken. As the sun dipped below the Austin skyline, I whispered to the quiet room, I don't hate you, Walter. I just refuse to carry your shame anymore. Then I locked the drawer and walked away, leaving the ghosts of betrayal sealed inside. For the first time since that awful night, I felt lighter. Because sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about peace, the kind that finally lets you sleep again. It's been 5 years since that night. The world outside my window hums with the noise of Austin cars rushing down Congress Avenue, the skyline taller than I remember, and the sun rising over the city like a promise kept. My office now sits on the 18th floor of Monroe Cyber Systems' new headquarters. The same woman who once cried in the dark over a $50,000 betrayal now signs million-dollar contracts protecting corporations from the very kind of theft that almost broke her. But I'm not proud because of the success, I'm proud because I survived. People still whisper about what happened. Some say I overreacted. Others call me brave. The truth is, I'm neither a saint nor a villain. I'm just a woman who refused to let betrayal define her. Ethan and I found our way back to each other slowly, painfully. Therapy, silence, rebuilding trust brick by brick. He never apologized for doubting me. I never demanded it. Some things heal not through words, but through time and quiet understanding. Walter was released last year. He works at a small hardware store in Waco now. Sometimes I imagine him stocking shelves, living in the echo of choices he can't undo. We haven't spoken since. I don't hate him, but I no longer owe him forgiveness either. My mother-in-law, Linda, eventually called. She cried on the phone and said she was sorry for not believing me. I told her I forgave her, and I meant it. Because the past doesn't own me anymore. When I look around my glass office, I see the reflection of a woman who learned the hard way that love without boundaries is not loyalty, it's surrender. Justice didn't sound like applause or victory. It sounded like silence, the kind that fills a room when truth finally settles. I still remember the faint click of my keyboard that night, the data trail lighting up like a constellation of betrayal. But now, when I hear that sound, I smile. Because that same sound, my keystrokes, my evidence, my courage became the rhythm of my freedom. And maybe that's what justice really is. Not revenge, not punishment, but reclaiming the version of yourself that someone tried to break. So if you've ever been betrayed, underestimated, or silenced, remember my story. Sometimes family loyalty means standing for what's right, even if you stand alone. Because truth doesn't need an army. It just needs one person brave enough to defend it. And to you watching this, thank you for being part of Revenge House USA, where every scar tells a story worth fighting for. Sometimes, when the office is quiet and the city lights blink against my window, I still hear the faint tap of a keyboard. It's strange how one sound can hold so much history. That single click used to mean betrayal. Now, it means rebirth. I used to think justice was loud, that it came with sirens, courtrooms, and headlines. But justice, I learned, is quiet. It's a calm that settles inside your chest when you finally stop explaining yourself to people who chose not to understand. For a long time, I carried anger like armor. I told myself I needed it to stay strong, to keep the pain from consuming me. But anger is heavy. It doesn't protect you. It buries you. I thought punishing Walter would heal me. I thought proving him guilty would make me feel whole again. It didn't, not right away, because revenge doesn't fill the silence left by broken trust, it only echoes through it. What finally set me free wasn't seeing him in handcuffs. It was the moment I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a victim anymore. The day Walter walked into that courtroom, I was still broken. The day I walked out, I wasn't healed, but I was awake. Awake to the truth that sometimes, the real revenge isn't about making them pay, it's about rising so high that their betrayal becomes irrelevant. I rebuilt my company brick by brick. I worked harder than I ever had, not to prove something to him, but to prove something to myself, that what was stolen from me was never my worth. Today, Monroe Cyber Systems trains hundreds of young women in cybersecurity. Most of them come from backgrounds where someone once told them, "You can't." Every time I teach them how to protect their own data, their own dreams, I feel like I'm rewriting my past. Walter once said family money should stay in the family. But I've learned that the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's resilience. And forgiveness? It isn't saying, "It's okay." It's saying, "You can't hurt me anymore." When I finally let go of the anger, I realized how small his crime looked compared to the size of my recovery. That's the secret no one tells you about betrayal. It's not the end of your story. It's the start of the chapter where you discover who you really are. Every scar on my heart has turned into a compass, pointing me toward a better version of myself, one that no one can steal. So, if you're listening to this, sitting in the dark wondering why someone you trusted broke you, I want you to hear me clearly. You are not the damage they caused. You are the strength that survived it. Don't chase revenge. Build something so beautiful that it becomes your answer. Let your success speak the words your pain couldn't. Because the most poetic justice is not seeing them fall, it's watching yourself rise. That's what I did. That's what you can do too. So to everyone who's ever been betrayed, hurt, or doubted, keep going, build, heal. Make your peace louder than their lies. And remember, every ending has an echo. Mine sounds like the soft click of a keyboard. The sound that once broke me, and now, reminds me I'm unbreakable. This is Eliza Monroe. This was my story. And you, yes, you are part of the Revenge House USA family now.